She was just an ordinary contestant. No one expected anything from her. But with her first shot, she shook not only the target but the entire system. A secret from the past broke the silence. This is the story of a woman who was meant to be silenced. Don't miss the story. Subscribe to the channel. The crowd had gathered around the open-air shooting range. It wasn't silent. There was a hum amidst laughter, mocking comments, and the sounds of camera shutters. But these noises faded when an unexpected figure stepped onto the field. She wore a faded brown jacket, gloves that reached her wrists, and a beanie that covered her head. Her shoes were muddy, and she took hesitant steps as if tripping over stones. People turned to look, some whispered, some raised an eyebrow, while others rolled their eyes. No one knew her name, but most immediately assumed she didn't belong there. This place was reserved for special invitees. It was set up for professional sharpshooters with certifications and sponsors, those who had been invited to the tournament. And traditionally, each year, the sponsor companies reserved a few spots for people chosen from the public. These spots were typically flashy pics meant for media attention, a war veteran, a young woman influencer, or someone who had overcome obstacles to achieve success. But this woman, she was ordinary, too ordinary. Still, her name was on the list. Emma. It must be a mistake, Clara said, adjusting her tactical gear with the logos of high-end brands, while sneaking a glance at her live stream on social media, which was reaching hundreds of thousands. She checked every expression she made. Beside her, Noah, the former champion with gray hair slicked back, was staring directly at Emma with a faint look of disdain. Emma. No last name, someone whispered. Maybe her name had been written on the list deliberately without a surname. But for some, that made it even more suspicious. Emma didn't respond. She seemed not to hear, looking around, her eyes shifting to the other competitors' weapons, the target boards, and the instructors. With every step, there was not insecurity but a cautious naturalness. People were so sure she was a beginner that no one felt threatened by her. She was more of a time waster in their eyes. But then, there was another movement on the field. A man with a silver-buckled belt and a leather jacket stepped out from the VIP tent. Lucas, the CEO of the tactical sports company sponsoring this year's event and one of the founders of the range. As soon as he arrived, the atmosphere changed. The press cameras adjusted their angles, and the competitors checked their positions. But Lucas walked straight toward Emma. That caught everyone's attention. You don't have a weapon, Lucas said, his tone calm but careful. Emma looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. It's not with me, she replied simply. The rules say you need to bring your own equipment, Noah said, trying to take advantage of the situation. If you don't, you'll be disqualified. Lucas hesitated for a moment, then gestured to his assistant. Give her a spare set. My instructions stand. The looks of disapproval filled the air. Clara bit her lip, thinking Lucas felt some sympathy for Emma. The other competitors murmured in frustration. This tournament was about professionalism, and now, an unnamed woman was receiving special treatment. But the story didn't end there. Emma took the tactical weapon she was handed and examined it carefully. Her hands didn't shake. Even her grip on the gun was remarkable. When she moved to the setup area, a few people who had assumed she was a novice fell silent. Even the trainers gave her a cautious glance. The preparation time begins, the announcement echoed. At that moment, everyone went quiet. Emma closed her eyes. The buzz of the crowd seemed to disappear for her. The target boards were in front of her, but her focus was elsewhere. She was almost lost in the silence of an old training ground from the past. A loud shot rang out. Then another, and another. Emma fired one shot at a time. Her posture didn't change. Between each shot, she made minute adjustments. From the outside, it didn't look like a dramatic display. It was a simple, quiet, and focused process. When the first series ended, the officer checked the target, paused, and then stopped. 10 shots, all in the center. Another silence followed. Even Noah missed a third of his shots, someone whispered. Lucas was smiling. But not just him. Some of the instructors were now watching Emma intently. Suspicion was giving way to admiration. But the story wouldn't end there. Because Emma's past was still unknown. And some people thought she hadn't come to the competition by her own will. Furthermore, some were deeply uncomfortable with her presence there. Because Emma wasn't just a competitor, she was the key to a long-buried secret. That day, amidst the gunshots echoing across the field, it wasn't just the targets that were pierced. A threat born from the silence had also awakened. Emma's name had begun to be discussed in the tournament tents, no longer just a contestant in an overlooked spot. But this attention brought with it not only admiration, but also suspicion. People were talking about how her calmness on the field, the emptiness in her eyes at that moment, felt eerily familiar. Since Emma's first shot, Lucas hadn't taken his eyes off her. And his focus wasn't just on her performance. His presence wasn't a mere coincidence. In fact, it was the silent step of a reckoning Lucas had left unfinished years ago. There was a look on his face as if he was seeing her for the first time. But deep down, a whisper of doubt told him he had known her long ago. That evening, as the competition area closed, everyone returned to their luxury tents and private vehicles. But Emma, unlike the others, had set up a small tent far away out of reach of the camp lights. She didn't want to be in the spotlight, almost as if she was avoiding being watched. Yet, in the middle of the night, a faint engine sound was heard. An SUV, headlights off, quietly approached the wooded area. Emma had not even started a fire. She sat in the dark, dismantling and reassembling an old weapon part like a mechanical meditation. The person who stepped out of the vehicle, in a long coat with muffled footsteps, approached. The tension in the air became palpable. This was someone who wasn't mentioned in the tournament, but whose name circulated in the shadows: Greg. He was the link between the gun sponsors and special training units. Though not openly visible, he was behind many decisions made on the field. "You never liked being seen," Greg said, emerging from the darkness. Emma didn't lift her head. She didn't respond, but it was clear she recognized his voice. Greg stepped closer. "Why would someone like you come back? Those files, they were buried. We thought we buried you too." Emma finally spoke. Her voice wasn't harsh, but it was straightforward. "You thought you buried me, but I was just watching, noting who's dirty and how deep the mess goes." Greg let out a short laugh, but there was tension in it. "Lucas might be protecting you, but this isn't all under his control. The final, it's not just a show, you know. The ones chosen, there will be assigned real missions." Emma slowly placed the weapon part on the table. "I don't want a mission." "No," Greg said, stepping closer. "You want revenge." In the brief silence that followed, even the distant hoot of an owl stopped. Greg dropped a file on the ground. "Here's your past. Everything that'll remind you why you stayed silent, who you stayed silent for, and what you need to do now is right here." Then, without a word, he quietly walked away. Emma didn't touch the file. She already knew the documents inside by heart. But something had changed. Greg's arrival had made it clear this wasn't just any tournament. This was the final stage to settle some old scores. The next morning, when she returned to the field, Clara's face bore an unmistakable smile. "I came to watch you this time," she said. But there was no curiosity behind her words, only a challenge. Because in the second round, Emma wasn't alone. Noah, the former champion, had stepped up specifically to challenge her. The target, 10 shots, 1 magazine, 3 minutes. The crowd held its breath. This time, it wasn't just a battle of skill, but of time as well. The first shot came from Emma. Then Noah responded, one by one, shot by shot. But after the 8th shot, Noah hesitated for a moment. A gust of wind shifted the target slightly. That hesitation became Emma's opportunity. The 9th shot, right in the center. Noah's brow furrowed. And with the 10th shot, Emma hit the target without blinking. It was so fast and precise that when the officer went to take the target down, his fingers trembled. 10 shots, all center hits, completed in record time, the officer announced. Noah silently lowered his gun, but his eyes were locked on Emma's. He knew her now, the woman from years ago. And something else became clear. Emma was no longer just a ghost from the past. She was opening a crack within the system. On the 3rd day of the tournament, the usual competitive atmosphere was replaced by a subtle tension. Participants smiled, cracked jokes, and were oiling their weapons, but something had changed. Everyone was talking about the same name, Emma. No one knew exactly where she had come from, but everyone was watching her center shots with a mix of admiration and unease. Clara, as she walked to the field that morning, had done her makeup more carefully. She posed for the cameras with each step, trying to keep Emma in the shadows. But it was becoming increasingly difficult, because the audience was now sharing videos of that mysterious woman, not Clara. Sponsorship offers had even started to be directed towards Emma, although she hadn't responded to any of them. Lucas sat alone in his office that morning. A copy of the file Greg had left lay on his desk. Inside that file was Emma's real identity, Emma Richter, the only witness in that closed case 5 years ago. She had worked on a weapons development project, then suddenly disappeared. She hadn't actually disappeared, she had been silenced. Lucas hadn't forgotten that case. Because in that case, he had lost someone. His sister. Official reports blamed the accident. But Lucas knew more. The project's inner workings, the falsified test results, the special weapon meant for military use, and the explosion during the test. Only blacked-out documents remained, and Emma, the sole surviving engineer, had disappeared. Until now, when she silently appeared before him. By noon, Emma was alone in the weapon cleaning area. She carefully disassembled the parts, wiping the insides with cotton. The staff watched her, but no one dared to approach. Then, a shadow appeared behind her. "Noah, you worked on that project," he said directly. Emma didn't look up. "Which project?" she asked, her voice ironic. She knew Noah was just testing her. "Lucas's sister died in that explosion, and you disappeared. But that weapon, the prototype, is being tested in this tournament. You know that, right?" For the first time, Emma looked up. "Yes, and those weapons are still flawed, still dangerous." Noah fell silent. He had doubts too, but he had chosen to remain silent until now. "The final stage of the tournament is tonight," Emma said. "The targets won't be fixed this time, and the new models will be used. This isn't a competition. It's a show set up to convince investors." Noah stepped back. "What do you plan to do?" As she reassembled the weapon's barrel, Emma simply said, "I'll show the truth. If necessary, I'll make the final shot at the real target." That evening, Clara posted a message on her social media account. The video implied that she had been researching Emma's past. "Some people aren't as clean as they seem," she wrote underneath. Emma's photo was slightly blurry but clear enough. Comments flooded in quickly. "Who is that woman? Is she really a competitor? They say her past is dark." Meanwhile, Greg was meeting with someone else. In the dim light of the VIP tent, he sat with a man in a dark suit. On the table were weapon catalogs, investment files, and a list. The target names for the final were listed. "Richter," the man said. "She wasn't on the list." Greg shook his head. "But she's on the field, and her past is a risk. Her connection with Lucas is dangerous too. In the final, she either makes a mistake or she's taken off the stage." The man calmly nodded. "Understood. If necessary, we can label it as a security error." That night, final preparations began on the tournament grounds. The stage was being changed. Instead of fixed targets, moving target machines were being set up and night vision systems were adjusted. Special equipment was being distributed to the participants. But Emma refused the weapon given to her. "I'll use my own," she said. "This model is the official equipment for the competition," the staff member said. Looking him straight in the eye, Emma replied, "I'll compete with my own truth." And no one dared to stop her. Night had fallen. The area for the final stage now offered a completely different view from the day. The lighting had been intentionally dimmed, and laser-assisted target systems were set up in the center of the field. The crowd was silent, but the tension in their silence hung in the air. Though presented as an ordinary competition, everyone knew it was a real performance test, especially the investors and the behind-the-scenes players. Lucas stood at the far corner of the VIP observation area, leaning into the darkness. The sounds of radios connected to the private security network echoed in his earpiece. His eyes were searching for Emma, but at the same time, he was paying attention to multiple things. He knew who Greg had met that evening. He also knew the file on Emma's past had been stolen. But there was one more thing, a detail not written in that file, one only Emma knew. And Lucas didn't want to close out the night without learning it. The first two competitors struggled to hit the targets. The moving systems, limited visibility, and the pressure of time made most of them make mistakes. But when Emma's turn came, the air on the field shifted. The tone of the announcer calling her name was even different, cold and hesitant. It was as if no one wanted her to succeed in this round. Emma walked onto the field, holding her own old model weapon. There was such stillness that even a pebble falling to the ground could be heard. While everyone else was equipped with goggles and tactical outfits, Emma looked like a time traveler with her simple clothes and old weapon, but as soon as she aimed, that perception vanished. Emma was focused on the center. The first target moved. With a laser light, it quickly darted to the right. Emma didn't wait, she pulled the trigger. The shot. Center. A murmur of surprise rose from the crowd. The second target, a three-dimensional rotating system, confused the crowd with its turns. Emma, however, solved the angle amid the spins and took it down with one shot. By the fifth target, most of the audience was holding their breath. From behind the scene, Greg nodded to a security guard. "If she doesn't make this shot, the target will be changed," he said. This was against the rules, but no one dared to speak out loud. During the seventh target, a small glitch was reflected on the screen. The system miscalculated the movement of the target. Emma's barrel shifted a fraction of a second to the left and she hit it. When the target fell, the system engineers exchanged looks. It wasn't just a target, it was a fake prototype test. Emma had already figured out its direction. After the eighth shot, the announcement stopped. A staff member walked toward Emma. "Your weapon will be checked," he said. "During the final?" Emma asked in a mocking tone. "By whose order?" "Security protocol." From his position, Lucas intervened. "The weapon was approved at entry. Let her continue." Greg's face tightened. Among the crowd, phone screens slowly began recording. Now, everyone's eyes were on her, not just on the targets, but on this woman. The ninth target. Emma didn't wait. She had figured out the system, even exceeding the engineer's expectations. The shot, inner circle. But for the 10th target, the system placed a different kind of target. It was a mannequin shaped like a human, and it had identifiable components inside. Normally, this target was only used for simulations. But tonight, there was a different reason. Emma recognized the internal structure of the target with one glance. It was the test model used in the explosion 5 years ago, and it still had the prototype number on it. A cold fury spread through her veins. This wasn't just a message. This was the darkest form of silence. At that moment, Emma lowered her weapon. The crowd looked on in confusion. Some whispered, "Is she not going to shoot?" But then Emma slowly stepped forward. She walked to the center of the field, breaking all the rules, and reached the side of the target. Every camera turned toward her. She dropped her weapon on the ground and pulled out a small metal piece from her pocket, a chip that had once come from her sister's body during the test, the one thought to be lost. She turned toward the microphone. "This chip holds the production information. This target model cost the life of an engineer 5 years ago, and back then, it was closed down with the excuse of a security error." The crowd froze. "I'm not just a good shooter. I'm one of the victims of that system. And I'm here today to show you who the real target is." Movement started in the VIP tent. Greg quickly stood up. Lucas, however, remained still, because he recognized the chip, and he knew everything was about to change. Emma took the weapon in her hand one last time, but this time, she didn't turn it toward the target. She turned it toward the audience. "You are the real target," she said. "Those who cheer on the system, but never look at the cost it exacts." Then, she left the field. Behind her, a weapon left without an owner toppled targets, and a crowd that could no longer remain silent. The next morning, nothing was the same. News websites, social media, exclusive streaming platforms, everyone was talking about one woman, Emma Richter. What had started as the story of an ordinary contestant had turned into a global headline overnight, exposing the dark side of the system. The silent hero of the tournament, the sniper, not the whistleblower, and even dropped her weapon, hit the truth, were the headlines flooding screens everywhere. The chip Emma had uncovered was quickly examined by a network of investigative journalists. The production dates, test results, and forged signatures documented a systematic cover-up operation. Moreover, it revealed that the prototype was still being pushed for release, and the tournament had been arranged for this purpose. But the system wasn't the type to give up easily. After the tournament, Emma had moved to an unknown address. She wasn't in the public eye, rejecting thousands of messages, interview requests, and sponsor calls from the press. She maintained only her silence. But that silence was her shield. In a secluded mountain cabin, a car approached early in the morning. It was Lucas. When he knocked on the door, Emma first turned to the window. Then, she slowly opened the door. When their eyes met, there were neither greetings nor accusations. Only the shared weight of a heavy past could be felt. Lucas extended a small digital screen in his hand. "This is a copy of the system logs," he said. "Greg's accounts, file transfer logs, and more. I brought them to you because, from here on, it's not my story, it's yours." Emma's eyes moved across the screen. "Why now?" she asked. Lucas took a long breath before responding. When my sister died, I didn't just mourn her. I blamed her. I thought it was a mistake that she was there. But then, when I met you, when I read the files, the missing pieces fell into place. This system didn't just deceive you, it deceived me too. Just then, Emma's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. Your location has been tracked. Run. Her eyes widened. Lucas immediately took action. I know the mountain road. We can take the back exit. Hurry. At that moment, Greg was in another building, watching the screens. Leaking Emma's location was his final move. But he was also under pressure. Public opinion had cornered the company. Investors were pulling back, and partners were holding meetings. But Greg stubbornly repeated one sentence. If Richter keeps talking, it won't just be the end for me. It'll be the end for all of us. Meanwhile, Emma and Lucas, as they fled along the mountain road, weren't alone. Several vehicles were in pursuit. But Lucas had connections from his weapons development days. When they entered a truck garage at the end of the road, someone was waiting for them. Noah, I think you owe me, he said, flashing a smile far from his usual stern look. Emma lowered her head. No, you just chose the right thing. Noah had loaded a bunch of documents and equipment into the truck bed. With this data, we can go straight to the board. But first, we'll entrust it to security. Right now, they'll try every legal or illegal way to silence you. But you're not alone anymore. These words broke something inside Emma. Perhaps the need to be seen, which she had suppressed for years, had finally found an answer. This war was no longer just hers. Her voice had multiplied. Later that day, an independent journalism network released Emma's information. But this time, it wasn't just news, it was visuals, system logs, prototype analysis, and the names of every company involved in the tournament. Greg's plan had backfired. Emma's silencing had made her more visible. That evening, at a special forum held in front of the media, a surprising name took the stage, Lucas. When all eyes turned to him, he raised the file in his hand. I grew up in this system. But while I grew, I didn't see which walls were dirty. Emma Richter is a threat, but not to our system, just to our lies. And the room fell silent. The courtroom was completely full. There was neither applause nor whispers. The red lights of the cameras were on, filling the air with an electronic unease, as though the atmosphere of a courtroom had taken over. Emma Richter made her way to the defense table with slow, quiet steps. Her black, simple outfit was not eye-catching, but it was now impossible for her to go unnoticed. She was no longer just a witness. She was the face of a movement. And today's trial wasn't just a reckoning for one company, it was a reckoning for the conscience of the entire system. On the opposite side, the men who had been making decisions behind the scenes for years, who had hidden documents and evaded responsibility, were seated, Greg and his collaborators. They had nowhere left to hide. The documents Emma had presented, Lucas's statements, Noah's technical verifications, and the media's evidence had cracked the wall they had built. Now, all they could do was deny the accusations. But this time, they weren't facing a mere engineer, they were facing a symbol with the support of millions. The judge raised his voice. The materials submitted to this court, internal system messages, archive test results, and prototype manufacturing records clearly show that the entire process was a deliberate cover-up, a calculated effort to put human lives at risk. This court will continue the proceedings publicly. Outside the courtroom, thousands had gathered, holding banners that read, "The real target is now you." Emma is not a person, she is a mirror. When Emma began to give her statement at the podium, the courtroom fell silent once again. At first, her voice was calm, almost emotionless. But with every sentence, the tone shifted, and the knot in the crowd's throat grew tighter. I was trained as an engineer. I learned to think rationally, to trust the data. But there came a day when my data was ignored. My warnings were silenced. And that day, there was an explosion. We lost a friend, a sister. We lost her. Then they silenced me. They allowed me to live but not to speak. Because speaking would shed light on other deaths. And the system didn't want that. Her eyes turned toward the crowd. But no system can bury the truth forever. Because sometimes, the truth has a face. It has a voice. And when that voice is heard, rather than silenced, it spreads like a spark. I lit that spark. And no matter what happens, I wanted to keep burning. The silence in the room was broken. Lawyers wiping away tears. Young people clenching their fists. Older people shaking their heads. This case was no longer just Emma Richter's case. It had become the voice of everyone who had been silenced. Weeks later, the court announced its decision. Greg and his partners were convicted of willful misconduct, evidence tampering, and endangering public safety. Tournament licenses were revoked, prototype production was halted, and all restrictions on Emma's file were lifted. But for Emma, this victory was not a story that would end with a celebration. Despite the press's insistence after the trial, she didn't give any interviews, didn't step onto any stages, and didn't accept any awards. For her, the greatest reward was the possibility of a world where a woman could speak without fear. After the trial, Lucas quietly saw her off. "Everything has changed," he said. Emma smiled. "No, the masks just came off. The truths were always there." In the end, she set up a small workshop in a distant seaside town. Away from technological devices, she worked with old mechanical systems. But there was a small sign on her door: "You don't have to change the world, but let your voice be heard against those who try to silence you." And every young woman who came to that workshop didn't just learn to aim weapons, she learned to aim for the truth.